How's it going, everyone? We've got more Stellar Blade updates to go over in this video, and some pretty interesting stuff all around to go over. The length of the game, and as far as how much content is gonna be in the game, we'll talk about that. On top of that, the director of Stellar Blade spoke a little bit about single-player titles, and the fact about the games having an ending and how that can benefit the game. You know, there's a lot of single-player games these days that have their endings or content attached to DLC, but we'll talk about that. And it looks like the game commercially is doing fairly well. It's not really that surprising of a statistic, but we'll talk that at the end of this video. So right off the top, Stellar Blade is looking to be around 25 hours in length. It seems like the main quest line, as noted on WCCF Tech, will be around 25 hours. Now, if you decide to do the side content and get all the collectibles, that could be 30 to 50 hours for the entire playthrough. On top of that, the game will be adding a New Game Plus sometime down the line as a free update. I would love if there is some crazy hard difficulty mode where people are putting on the skin suit, and then on top of that, they're putting it on the hardest difficulty, and then the game is like super challenging, and it kind of plays up some of the aspects of the game. I think that would be hilarious. I think that would be such a fun promotional tool for the game, and on top of that, revitalize interest in the game post-launch, doing New Game Plus, maybe adding a super hard difficulty, and people are going to try to play it on that difficulty, and then playing it with the skin suit. I think that would be pretty cool. I just think that would be something fun, and people would try to have a field day in terms of completing the game that way, and it would be super challenging. But as far as the game being 25 hours, let's just say it's 20 to 25 hours, guys. I am totally cool with that length. Not every game needs to be this bloated open world, and there are so many games these days that I do think are going the route of being this bloated open world. And you guys already know what franchise I think of when I think bloated open world. We don't need to go down that rabbit hole yet again, but a 20 to 25 hour concise experience where you have quality-filled content. The content is there, it's a decent amount of content, but the content is meaningful and it's quality, then I would say you're hitting a nice sweet spot. 30 to 50 hours, like 50 hours for this game, I really think is going to be people that really take their time and try to do everything. I think most people are probably going to get 20 to 25 hours of gameplay. It's an action RPG. But you know what? For $70, I know some people are going to be of the mindset, hey, I'm spending $70 on the game, I should get 60, 70, 80 hours out of the game. If you think that, I'm not here to try to change your line of thinking. I just can speak for myself, and myself personally, I would much rather take a $70 game that's 20 to 25 hours. Now, I don't think you could do a $70 game and have it be 8 hours in length. I think Callisto Protocol misfired there, and, you know, some games at the end of the day, if they're a big enough IP, they can get away with a 10 to 12 hour campaign. Stellar Blade is a brand new IP, much like Callisto Protocol was a brand new IP. If Stellar Blade was a 7 to 8 hour long game, I still think it would do okay, but at that point, I think, you know, that $70 price tag would be pushing it. Because let's be real, $70 is expensive for a video game, and it should have a reasonable amount of content. And I think reasonable is 15 to 25 hours. 7 to 10 hours, I would be like, okay, that's a little bit short, or very much short. But you know what? The game length should be defined based on what makes the best game possible, and then you should price it after that. The game length shouldn't be defined based on the price point. They should work in conjunction, where you create the game is X hours long, and then you decide on the price point. That would be an ideal world. I know that based on budgets being allocated for video games, the price point of a video game a lot of the times is set well before that game is even nearing completion, and they've even decided on, you know, various elements of the game. I get that that is the case, but if this was a perfect world, it would be you create the game, what kind of game length is going to work the best for the style of game you're creating that's going to create the most compelling game and the best quality filled game, and then you can decide on the price point and deem it wherever you want to be. And if it's at a certain quality level, hey, a 20-hour game can be $70 and a 15-hour game can be $70 as well, depending on quality level. And then you're going to see other games be $30, and then, you know, be possible that you could play those games for 80 to 100 hours. That's a real thing, but I don't think 20 to 25 hours for a main story playthrough for a game like this, at 70 bucks even, is that big of a deal. I actually think it's the perfect amount. I think if you would have ended up going for a 50 to 70 hour main story for the style of game that Stellar Blade is, I think it would have ended up being a lot of bloated nonsense, and I'm happy they didn't go that route, and hopefully Stellar Blade is the type of game that you want it to be all killer, no filler, and hopefully that is what we're gonna end up getting. We'll find out soon enough, come April the 26th. Also, Stellar Blade director Kim Hyung-tae spoke a little bit about single-player games and Shift Up continuing to make them, noting sales success has become a severe issue in recent years due to the rising cost of development. To be honest, I often hear advice from people around me that it would be better to make games that have higher profit margins, but what our industry needs more than anything is variety, isn't it? Console titles that is single-player games with an ending have a very important value in themselves. A market where such games continue to be made and coexist with other genres and platforms is healthier. That's why Shift Up will continue to take on the challenge of console games in the future. We have a strong desire to continue to create games that allow many gamers to enjoy to the end and return to reality feeling good. I really like that final statement. Enjoy it to the end, and then you can return to reality. Returning to reality means continuing with your life and moving on with the next game. Let me circle to my point that I always make about live service games, because the market for a long time has been so bloated with these live service experience. Guys, when it comes to live service games, we all know what the game is. Most people cannot juggle more than 2 live service games at a time. You playing Helldivers 2 right now? You're probably not juggling many more live service games on top of that. Are there really people out there that are juggling Helldivers 2, League of Legends, World of Warcraft, and Final Fantasy XIV at the same time? Is that happening? No, that generally isn't. Live service games, you're usually invested heavily into 1, maybe 2 games at max, and then you'll shift to other games and so on and so forth. But usually you have to drop those live service games at some point because they eat up so much time. And obviously these live service games are created to get your money, but what's more finite than money? It is your time. You have only so many hours in the day. When it comes to a game like Stellar Blade, that 20 to 25 hours almost works in favor in comparison to a lot of other games on the market, especially when you talk about the consumer base that these games are starting to attract. I feel like the audience for video games is getting older and older. A lot of this audience that these games are attracting are your 25 to 34-year-old audience that grew up in the PlayStation 2 era, and now they might have a level of disposable income where I'm not saying they're throwing out money willy-nilly, but the idea of a $70 title that'll offer you a 25-hour experience, that's not a bad thing in the world to them, and they would much prefer that over a live service game that's going to be monetized to the nth degree. Now, the live service games that really pop off do pop off, but in the case of single-player games with a definitive ending, I think it's a healthier marketplace for a lot more games to succeed. Live service is going to be a top-heavy, where the upper echelon, the top-level live service games do really, really well and do really well for the publisher. And then you've got all of these other games that come out and people just don't talk about them, they're forgotten about. Now, that's the case with single-player games as well, and big-budget $70 games without a live service element. Not every game is going to pop off. You see your Immortals of Aveums, you see your Forspokens, you see your Callisto Protocols, but I do think there's a greater level and potential of success for that market of games, especially now in comparison to 80 million live service games coming out. That's just my 2 cents. I get it that these games are getting more and more expensive. I think there's also an argument that we can scale these games back, but then there's the alternative argument of the toothpaste being out of the tube, and if you scale the games back, then that'll push people away from playing games. It's a wild argument to have, and there's so many layers to it that I can't get into everything. What I do know is I think Stellar Blade, for the style of game that it is, a single-player action RPG, maybe to a lot of publishers, they would look at a game like this and they wouldn't greenlight it because it's not the style of game that's going to be offering you residual revenue for a lengthy period of time. But Stellar Blade got greenlit. It got funding from Sony. And I think the game's going to do very well. I think it's going to do very well on PS5, and then I think it's going to do very well on PC when it ultimately comes out there. Lastly, I do want to note that Stellar Blade is currently listed as the #1 pre-order on the PlayStation Store. That's a fine statistic, and that's a statistic that people will be happy about, especially on social media, especially about for people that want this game to do well. The thing is, we're inching closer and closer to the release of this game. That's when pre-orders are naturally going to appreciate. I'm sure the demo helped, and I do think it was very effective in releasing a demo for a game like this, but I think this would be the #1 pre-order regardless right now, because if you look at the games coming out in April and even into May, Stellar Blade really is the biggest game. You've got Sandland coming out, you've got Eiyuden Chronicle, but Stellar Blade is bigger than both of those games. And then outside of that, it's relatively sparse in terms of big titles coming out. Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail, I think, is #2, and you know, that's not a gigantic release. It's an expansion of a game that is super popular, don't get me wrong, but Dawn Trail is still a little bit of a ways out. So, you know, Stellar Blade being #1, great statistic, but I think it's an expected statistic as well. But that'll do it for me. Again, want to bring you guys more coverage of this game. I've been talking up this game for, feels like for a while, but they've done a lot of good with this game, and I think they've promoted it very heavily. And when you've got Eve at the center of the promotional material, look, that helps. That certainly does help. I'm not taking anything away from that, but it was always going to fall flat on its face if the fundamental gameplay elements weren't good, and I think those are at a level where people are more excited about this game on top of, you know, Eve being Eve. But that'll do it for me. Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments section down below. Sound off there. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you're already subscribed, do us a favor and hit the bell icon. This way you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. That's the best way to keep up with all of our uploads, and we usually try to upload 2 videos a day. And with the bell icon hit, you'll be notified whenever we do upload a video. As always, thanks for watching.